Jey Presents Spotlight on the Arts.
Today I visit with Rosemarie Kinder from Warrensburg, Missouri. I'm Rick Jey, and this is Spotlight on the Arts, coming to you today from the Lamies Building in Sedalia, Missouri. If you would, join me in welcoming Rosemarie Kinder from Warrensburg, Missouri, writer, journalist, poet, I understand. So welcome, Mrs. Kinder. To welcome Spotlight on the Arts. I'm truly excited to turn the spotlight on you today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today, and I love this venue. I thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, this is your first visit with me on Spotlight on the Arts. I've been looking forward, let's say, to this meeting, our first meeting of quite a while, for a few months anyway, since we met at the Mid-Missouri Artists Association exhibit there in Warrensburg, Missouri last August, in fact. Well, Rosemarie, you look like you're comfortable. So first, if you would, please share with the viewers a little bit about Rosemarie Kinder.
Oh, I'm happy to. I'm a Missouri girl. I was born in Bloomfield, Missouri, Stoddard County, Crowley's Ridge, although some people would quarrel with that designation since we're above the Boot Heel line. And I spent about 20 years there, and 20 years in Arizona. And then I received my 3 degrees there. And I came back to Missouri in 1989 to teach at the University of Central Missouri, where I edited Pleiades, literary journal. I published a little bit of creative writing. I retired in 2002 and took up my other career, which I guess is as a writer. My first real work was in a shoe factory in Advance, Missouri, and I didn't want to be a factory worker because most of the women that I knew in my hometown, in my particular social echelon, they worked at the factory. I didn't want to. And so when the prosecuting attorney of Stoddard County looked for a secretary, I had 1 year of college at SEMO, but I wanted that job, and so I applied for it. And then I called him at home and told him that if he would hire me, I would go to, Three Rivers College in Poplar Bluff, to night school, to brush up on my shorthand and my typing. And at that time, by the way, I was writing, but I was going to earn my living. And he hired me, and because of that, I was able to work and put myself through school and all sorts to help my husband and all sorts of things as a legal secretary. And then I studied writing. So that's my work history. Since then, I've taught at a university.
Well, if you can, tell us what really inspired you to become a writer then? Was that at a young age? And mother, was she a writer? Poet?
My mother wasn't a writer, but I'm glad you intuited that question because my family they were musicians, singers.
Yes.
And so what was very popular and when we got together were ballads and lyrics and short stories, and it was oral entertainment, and it translates into writing, the oral tradition of writing.
Right. Songwriter, yes.
And so that was the first inspiration. But also, and I can't discount it, is the guidance of teachers and writing communities and other writers who sort of fortify you and make you feel like what your bent is, what you want to do, is something that you should do.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't get that, and I've had that all the way. So that is what inspired me along the way, particularly in Tucson then. When I went back to college to get a teacher's certification because I thought that's what women, even though I was sort of a feminist,
I see.
even though I was a
I can
feminist,
imagine. Someone's got to help build the fire and push on.
I believe that women, that teaching was the most respectable thing that I could attain to at that time because I was older and I had 2 children. But one teacher, Ruth Gardner, said, Rosemary, you're a writer and you should study writing. Well, it never occurred to me that you can study writing. I thought you just wrote. You studied other subjects, but you didn't study writing.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And because of her, I wound up pursuing writing for a bachelor's and a master's. And I would have taken my PhD in creative writing, but they didn't allow that. So I got it in rhetoric.
Where was she a facilitator at this time where you studied under her? Was that in Missouri?
No, that was in Tucson, and that was Ruth Gardner. And I didn't study her fiction, but she's the one that urged me into it. I studied under, the first one was Robert Downs, and then C.S. Palmerman, and then Jonathan Pinner, Vance Borgelli, and I was nurtured and urged to be a writer.
Oh, excellent.
But I was also told not to count on making my living that way. That what I should do was get a job that didn't drain me very much in the daytime or at night, like a bartender. That's what they suggested.
Oh, I see.
And then don't count on making your living with writing.
Right, so it's like in the entertainment industry, movies, what have you, you better have that other skill to go with.
Yeah, you have to find a way
until something else comes along.
Yeah.
Well, what then continues now in this year 2022? What continues you to be a writer?
Well, that's a good question because a lot of the same things are supporting me. I have writing communities, writing friends, and when you know that there's a group of people in the country who like what you do or in the world, and you belong to that community, you always have a place. You know, when you're doing something that people don't value, it's really, really hard to be inspired.
Right.
But when you're around people who do and you see them continuing whether or not they succeed, and then to read, you read something that someone wrote and you think, like Paulette Giles, Missouri writer, The News of the World.
Yes.
And I think, oh, why can't I write like that? I wish I could write like that. Daniel Woodrell.
Evidently. Well, you know, you have to be inspired by those around you with the same desire, same dreams. It helps a lot. You always feel at home with them, and they know they need your inspiration as much as you need theirs. So it works out really great.
Could I add a couple more things about inspiration? Is that all right?
Yes, sure.
All right. One thing that I skipped, there were 2 things I skipped in my answer. One is that what really inspires me to write has happened all my life, and that's I see something that attracts my attention and that I value, and I want other people to either see it, understand it, question it, sympathize, like an act of bravery, for example, or act of endurance, or standing up to a bully, things like that, and I have to write about it. And so that is an inspiration. And this next one, I want to use this venue to say that a great inspiration for me has been my daughter, and in an unusual way. My daughter have managed to elevate my writing itself, the product itself, and my choice to be a writer because she didn't feel that publishing is the goal of writing. She didn't think it mattered whether or not I got published. It was the writing that was important because you never know who it's going to touch, who it's going to affect. And even if you never publish it, you may write to something that you understand now, that you've explored, that changes you, and if it changes you, it may change other people. And because of her inspiration, that long span of time between my first collection and my second, 16 years, her philosophy is what took me forward.
Yes, the same thing as an artist. You paint something that you have to, more or less, your intellect or whatever says, I've got to paint this. And you have to learn to come to a certain point that it doesn't make any difference whoever likes it, or if it's going to be sold, what have you, you paint it because you're inspired to paint it like a poet, like a writer. It comes from the inspiration, I believe, first. And so whatever happens after that is great, especially in publishment of a book, I imagine.
Right.
Well,
My daughter wanted to tell me that. She said, you don't need to be inspired, Mother, you're driven.
Yes, we got that. Yes, good point.
Maybe it's so.
Yes. Well, Rosemary, we must take a break, so please make yourself comfortable while we look at these special messages. After the break, Rosemary will fill us in on her favorite subject matter, her special way of completing a writing, or any special techniques that she uses to more or less get her in the writing mood. She's going to cover all that. So stay with us. There's a lot more here on Spotlight on the Arts. We'll be right back.
Stay with us. There's more to come on Spotlight on the Arts.
Creative, connection, control. Support the arts and be the change. 24 hours a day, 200 countries. The show must go on. Introducing the world's first exclusive platform for artists and creators of all kinds. The biggest stage on earth.
Stream Spotlight on the Arts on fanforme.com. Stream Spotlight on the Arts on GIAJ Global Media OTT Network. Google us or find us on Roku, Amazon Fire.tv, or Apple.tv.
Welcome back, everyone, to Spotlight on the Arts. I've now turned back to our guest today, Rosemary Kinder from Warrensburg, Missouri, a writer that you should get really to know. Well, Rosemary, before the break, you shared a lot of information, and so let's continue along those lines of thought and expression. Please, if you would, describe your type of writing and how that came about with your skills considered. I know there's other writers out there that if they're having difficulty coming up with a certain line, what have you, do you have certain techniques? And so what is your type of writing?
Well, the people, the reviewers of my work, particularly of the short story collections, because there have been 3 of those, identify me as a realist and as a regionalist, because I tend to write about Missouri and about a certain spot in Arizona, the Southwest. There are other stories, but I'm a realist and a regionalist. But although that's where I've had my modest success in realism,
I see.
even one of my books was about a serial killer, but it's realistic and written realistically. But even though I do that, I have another self that writes fantasy. And I have been trying to develop that ability over the years, and I am now trying to shift into, because I have 5 works of fiction published, and at my age, I'm ready to try to let whatever is going to happen, and I want to write my fantasy. So that's where I am now.
Excellent, great.
And then you ask about my techniques or practices. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, the standard one that I use, and I think most writers have one way that they tend to do the most, is something strikes my heart or my intellect and I have to write about it. I think about it. So there comes a point where I have something to start with. I know whose story it is, or at least where to start, and I write it. And it may take me a week, it may take me 3 months, but I write that story. Well, the standard way I write most stories, and I think most writers have a pattern, they have a discipline, and they write it this way. But what happens first is I'm prompted to think on something. I'm touched by it, I dwell on it, and it begins to unfold in my mind till I know where to start, or I think I do. And then I write. And ever how long it takes, when I do finish that draft, I have one of two reactions. I'm either thrilled to death with it and I want to send it out right away. I want someone to read it and tell me how good it is. Or I think this is trash. I have wasted all this time and I should throw it away. But I don't do that. What I do is I save it. I put it away. By the way, this is what Ben Franklin said to do with writing, is write it, put it away, and come back to it a day or two later. But I may come back a week later. I don't know when I'll come back. And when I read it again, there'll come a time where you see the promise of the piece, what it could be if you'll put the time in, and the flaws of the piece. And that's the best part of writing, well, second to creation, because you get to polish and refine and let it be what it was going to be. Other people may not like it, but that's the process.
I see.
And then there's another process, and that is, nobody can plan this. But you'll be working on something, you get finished with it, and you think, boy, I'm through, and this other idea pops up complete. It is a story that has written itself while you were doing something else, and you can write it almost totally the way it is the first writing. And I'm sure most people have that.
Excellent, excellent, great description. It's like a painting again. You pick up put in the final touches, highlights, and what have you. And that painting can definitely inspire another painting, so inspire another book. Well, very good. Well, Rosemary, the COVID-19 pandemic has really had an effect on one being able to exhibit on most venues and publication, whatever. How has this affected you and your writing?
Well, I think it did affect me, of course, but it was a curse and a blessing, odd way. But first of all, I want to say that anything that I suffered, anything from the pandemic, is minor compared to what has gone on over the world and even in my little area.
I see.
But what happened was I found out in January of 2020 that my book had been accepted by the University of Notre Dame, my last collection, and would be published in 2021. Well, they weren't going to announce it until March, because that's a formal announcement. The pandemic hit in March, so the formal announcement never came out, not in Writers Chronicle or any of the places that writers want to see that notice. It did come out on the Facebook page of the Creative Writing Department from the University of Notre Dame. But that was a big heartache, because I thought, it's not getting the send-off, But on the other hand, I had a book to work on during the pandemic, that first year of closure. I had a woman named Catherine Lehman working with my prose to polish it up. I had people from the press contacting me. When they could get back to their office, they were wonderful. And so while all this horror was going on outside, I had this jewel at the house. Unfortunately, my husband had a mild stroke, which he recovered from at the same time. And so there were a lot of things going on, but that shows what writing can do for you if you're a writer. And I'm sure everybody else has something that works that way with them. This is my gift. This is my contentment in life. This is what I'm supposed to do. It may be baking or quilting. I don't know what it is, but mine was writing.
Personally, I can identify with that. The early days of the 2019, when it's all began, I had tried to find time between Spotlight on the Arts and different programs, different jobs, doing commercials, what have you. I ended up being able to paint. First time in like 6 years. So I completed 5 paintings, which then I got to share last year in 2021. So it seems like it made us slow down. We had time to really enjoy something that we had time to think about and put our time and thought into. So, well, that's great. Well, I understand you have a reading you'd like to share with us today.
Right. I'm going to read the last. This was the work that I did during the pandemic. It was published by the University of Notre Dame.
And that title is? A
Common Person and Other Stories, and it's available on Amazon. All of my books are available on Amazon or through all major bookstores. except one, and that's about a Missouri fiddler, and it's available at the Historical Society in Warrensburg, Missouri.
Historical Society in Warrensburg. Okay.
But I want to read this last paragraph because even though my writing is often bleak, there's a message I'm always trying to get to about people, about humans and our society. And this last scene in this last major publication of mine sort of expresses that in a way. It's set in a bar, and I'm not a drinker, so it's not what it is. It's a community of people who form an audience for a local band, and they go to the bar when the local band is playing. And over that period of time, they have observed relationship between this woman and her husband, and a divorce, and her battle with cancer. And she has come, and this is the end of that story. It's just a couple paragraphs, very short.
Please.
Okay. She'll tell him where to go. No, why do you think she's here? Something will happen. It doesn't really matter. That they knew was the truth. Across the room, the musician was shaking the hand of the new man, was pulling a chair out, twirling it so he could straddle the seat and rest his elbows on the back. The sheer grace and masculinity of the movement brought new appreciation to the onlookers. Here's to him, one said, and raised his mug. Another joined in, and to the new guy. I'll bet you he can hold his own. Well, what about her? Okay then, to the whole damn show. They raised glasses, clinked them, sipped, gulped, laughed, winked at one another. The toast went beyond their table and her table, and maybe even beyond their lives. The outcome didn't matter at all. This was a story they all knew and held dear in their hearts.
Excellent, excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.
What a moment. I can picture that.
Thanks.
Sometimes those toasts reach beyond just the locals in the, should we say, in that area. Well, excellent, excellent. It's a book that should be read, and that's called A Common Person. I understand, yeah. Okay, great. Now, Rosemary, do you write poetry or stories for people on a commission basis? And if you do, or if you were to sell your work, whatever, publicize it, do you have a website address if people have more questions?
Yep. I have, I'm rmkinder.com is my website. My contact is there. I do events for schools
readings,
and libraries, or sometimes little programs, for example, women and food and literature, things like that. But mostly, no, the only writing commission I do is when we're at street fairs and people want a poem about their daughter or something, I can do
see.
that.
Very good. Now, you have a couple books here we've added to the collection. An Absolute Gentleman, and the other one is?
Universe Playing Strings.
Oh, I see.
Now, The Absolute Gentleman is about a serial killer, and I did know a serial killer, and I did testify in his trial, but this is not about that. I researched it and wrote this book, and it made some money, which is good, but the granddaughter of the murderer I did know, that I had met,
Personally?
wrote me a letter and told me that this book was not about him, and I told her if she had read the essay at the end of the book, she would know it wasn't about him.
Great. So you had to more or less cover yourself, making sure.
Well, I researched serial killer. If you've ever been in a situation like that, you research a subject to learn. I think I do anyhow.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're about out of time. Do you have any closing words or thoughts, inspiration for writers that you'd like to share with the world, those writers out in the world? We know there's many, and Spotlight on the Arts covers, there's no boundaries now, thanks to fanforme.com and GIAJ and Metro Global OTT Network, so we're reaching viewers worldwide. So what would you say as an inspiration to those worldwide you would like to see pick up the pen and share their story?
I would tell you to begin. Begin doing what you want to do, even if it's in a short span of time. Begin doing it. Become being who you want to be, Make time for it. Make appointments with your work because that's your passion, as you would make appointment with a doctor or something. Make appointments with your work and keep it. And let yourself develop. Let yourself develop as you will, whether it takes years or a short period of time, and value what you do.
Excellent. Thank you. Great advice, I tell you. Well, I want to thank you once again for contributing to Spotlight on the Arts. And it's really been an inspiring visit with you. Informational experience and also educational.
Thank
so
you.
I want to thank you.
Thank you. I very much enjoyed it. I'm grateful to you for the opportunity and for the graceful leading through it, and grateful to everyone who listens.
So look up Rosemary Kinder online, Amazon, and take an interest in reading one of her books, if you will. I know you will not be disappointed. Thank you. Well, that wraps up another look at an inspiring writer, journalist here on Spotlight on the Arts. Thank you, viewers, for joining me here today, and a special thanks to Lamy's Building, providing such a great venue for taping of the Spotlight on the Arts. Be healthy, stay healthy. Rick Jey saying, see you next time.
This facility doesn't look anything like it did when I first saw it. My very first job was right here making Levi's for the J.A. Lamy Manufacturing Company. The people who I worked for were great. It was hard work and it was brutal, but the family that owned the building were fair and honest, and they were great to work for. I worked here 7 years. My father worked here 21 years, and my mother 10 years. And it was just a great place. I've never regretted it. I started out in the shipping department, and I graduated up into the cutting room and worked there spreading cloth for most of that period of time. Well, absolutely, Ginger Swearingen would have been the individual who I remember most. She was involved strongly with my acting opportunities, and she was director and producer, and she was fun to work for as well. I've known the whole family for quite a number of years, staff and John and Ginger and Woody, and they were all customers in our business, and they've just done a beautiful job with this. It's just beautiful, and the people that I talk to who have been customers here and visitors have all enjoyed it a great deal. Everyone talks about the quality of the food, and it's just a very entertaining place, and I'm looking forward to it.